Tuesday, Tuesday, Tuesday. It's the giants of sequential art facing off in the most inconsequential bout of their careers. In the blue corner, we've got Duking Detective Comics, and in the red corner, it's Militant Marvel. Which of these quintessential comics companies will be crowned king of cartoons, and which will be quickly quashed by conquest? Find out right now on this week's episode of Strikes Our Fancy.
Hell yeah.
Bravo.
Well, welcome to season 3, where I will literally punch Mike in the face tonight. Because of his views, strictly because of his views. Our friendship cannot stand that. So, but we've been doing this for 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And Rob gave a little soliloquy about his thoughts.
Yeah, I appreciated your ramblings, Rob.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that was nice to hear.
Did you have any thoughts before we continue on?
I think, Rob, you made a great point. I really enjoyed, and I hope we continue to do it. Just more guests.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was really nice, or a really a way to push ourselves a little bit more during year 2.
Yeah.
So that was nice. But speaking of, we have, along with us tonight, someone who might go home with some physical injuries.
Marvel's Defender, Mike.
Hey, longtime listener and sometimes guest. We're glad to have you back, Mike.
Boo.
Always glad to be on.
But so, yeah, Mike, you threw out some spicy comments.
Scathing words.
A couple weeks
I
back.
couldn't stand. I couldn't let it stand.
That makes sense. I was potentially overly harsh, but it was the internet, so I have to be inflammatory.
That's true. Yeah.
Did you imbibe before that comment? I'm just curious.
It's hard to say.
Okay.
Potentially.
Who can remember? Well, Mike, I'm a little disappointed starting out the evening with a retractment. Like, that's not the kind of energy I was hoping you were going to bring tonight.
Well, everybody likes their own thing, and I don't necessarily want to be the person to come in and just like shit all over a thing that someone really enjoys.
That's
This
the whole
is
point
a
of this
podcast.
episode.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But also, I have opinions, and I feel that everyone is entitled to hear my opinion.
Yeah.
That's why we continue to have you on.
No, thank you.
I want to see the physical manifestation of both of your conviction. I do want to see blows traded tonight.
Mhm.
So for those who haven't been tuning in the last couple weeks, we have a bit of a comic gauntlet tonight. Mike took the stance that Marvel comics are better than DC, and Caleb took great exception to that. And so both raised up what they consider the pinnacle of each publishing house to be. And so, I think just to start us off, could each of you tell us what were the runs of choice that you thought best exemplified your publishing house of
Sure.
choice?
And to clarify, this is just comics, because if we were saying which is better, Marvel or DC, in its entirety, it's really hard to beat the Hulk ride at Universal Studios.
That is true.
That would win. It just hands
That
down.
ride is amazing.
That was a lot of fun.
Specifically the Hulk?
Yeah.
I've not heard of this ride.
It's great.
Oh, it's
Isn't
like
it
a
a roller
roller
coaster?
coaster.
Mhm. It's a lot of fun. They did good work.
Nice.
And it's at Universal, which is weird because, Disney owns Marvel now, so
Well, that's been there forever, though.
yeah. But
Do you
yeah,
think
sorry.
Do you think they'd rename it if like Disney got all uppity about it? Like
Probably.
the Incredible Bulk Ride.
Yeah, I think whenever that specific licensing thing ends, which is just bizarre, the whole licensing thing between Fox and Marvel and Sony and all that. Whenever that ends, they'll probably keep the roller coaster, but just retheme it. Would be my guess.
Can I just say quick that Marvel did sell off all its assets in the 90s, which is why there's a big fucking rights thing. And DC didn't have that. So DC didn't go through that. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and DC could always, make a movie or whatever of any of their characters, and they didn't have to fight with anyone else for it.
And yet we only ever got Batman and Superman.
Yeah, we got George Clooney Batman, the best Batman.
But we also got the Flash.
In more
Okay.
recent days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, you go back 15 years, and yeah, like to Rob's point, I think you got nothing in the cinema universe except for Batman and Superman.
Mm-hmm. And a really bad attempt at Green Lantern.
I forgot about that.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I don't think it's that bad, but that's just me. I'm just going to say it.
But a little bit more back on track. So, Mike, what are the runs that you chose out of the Marvel comic universe?
So I chose Civil War 1, I guess it would be, Secret Invasion, the 2015 version, and Secret Wars, which I think was a little bit after that. Was it before that? All right. Secret Invasion.
I think you got to switch. Secret Wars was the 2015, and Secret Invasion was in 2008.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do not quote the old magic to Caleb.
No, yeah.
Well, I'm just the old Secret Wars was the 80s one. So
Yep. And I go into this fully knowing that Caleb has vast amounts of knowledge, more than I do on these. So even though we're in a duel, I will probably defer to his expertise on a lot of the details for some of these things.
Just again, stand by your convictions. Make wild accusations with no evidence. Like we're not going to fact check you. You'll just drive up Caleb's blood pressure, and we'll laugh. It'll be great.
It's a funny coma.
Yeah. All right, Caleb. And what series did you choose out of the DC comic universe?
I went and chose Batman: The Court of Owls, All-Star Superman, and Final Crisis. And the smile that I get from everybody when I mention Final Crisis makes me think everybody enjoyed this ride.
Oh yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. We'll go with that for now.
So I got to ask you guys, when you were choosing these comics, it seems to me like you just picked a huge culmination that brings a lot together. And in my opinion, those were not great choices for someone who's like not really well versed.
You both told me specifically I can dump you in somewhere no
Right,
matter
right.
what.
Yeah.
But narratively, it was I didn't know what was going on at the beginning of most of those comics.
Final Crisis was the culmination of 3 years worth of
Right.
stories.
Yeah, that one especially. Some of the other ones, we'll get into them as we go into them. But so why these choices?
You know, that you make a good point, Rob. I chose them for a couple different reasons. One, when I first started getting into reading comics, rather than I consumed Marvel in many different ways. You know, from the cartoons in the 90s, X-Men and Spider-Man. I played Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2, video game and other Marvel video games, and then of course the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And Civil War was really the first comic that I read for Marvel. And so that's why I chose Civil War, because I loved it. That was my diving in point.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't necessarily that this is pinnacle Marvel comic universe. It's it was more nostalgia. You just wanted to share it with us?
Partially. And then partially I do think it is. I mean, I got so into it. So there's the main run of Civil War, which is, I don't know, 9 issues or something like that. And then there are all these different side issues, which they do for every big event in Marvel and DC, I'm sure. But I bought all of them that I could find. So I have a whole shelf of just Civil War comics.
Can I jump in for a moment here?
Absolutely.
Just dive right on in. I'm with Mike. I really love Civil War. This was Secret Invasion, Secret Wars. They're also big line-wide, company-wide events, but Civil War was really the first event for every sort of you see the main event, issues 1 through 7, but there's obviously missing action pieces within this series. We'll get to that later, but they're filled in by their own solo titles. This was a very tight, concise, line-wide, company-wide event where every issue with the Amazing Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, X-Men, all these, they were affected by the Superhero Registration Act.
If you are a Marvel Comics fan, you cannot escape the Civil War. Is that kind of the message they were sending out?
Yep.
So it was really cool and how tightly that all came together for that. I don't think Secret Invasion does it quite as well with the tie-ins, but Civil War I do think it's a pinnacle sort of Marvel event, and I love it.
Okay.
Yeah. But to your point, Rob, that does kind of make sense, that if you don't know what's going on, before these big events or in different issues with the characters, it could be hard to latch onto. And so the other half of it was why I chose these 3 was I own all of them.
Sure.
And I went to my big tub of comics and I was going through it and trying to find what I had complete runs of. And I had complete runs of those, the 3 that we mentioned. I had a complete run of one Doctor Strange run. I think it was the Death of Magic, which is honestly really great and I loved it, but just decided not to choose that one. And then everything else I didn't have a full run of. I almost chose the Clone Conspiracy, which is a Spider-Man one, which is more, it's the Spider-Man centric.
So what I'm getting here is you are so confident in your position that you didn't say, what is the best comic. You just said, what garbage do I have laying around? Whatever it is, it'll beat DC.
Well, I am a man of class, and so the things that I own are obviously the best.
When you have a bespoke collection, they're all winners.
I do also own Secret Empire, though, so you can take that as a that one I did not have you.
Well, now I want to read that one
because I have figured everyone would say that was awful and I hate it.
There's a lot of vague anti-Semitism in that one, and I don't care for it.
Ooh.
Oh, sure, yeah, it's I read it and there were parts of it that I enjoyed, but it wasn't the best at all. It was very controversial for a number of reasons, and I think those reasons are entirely valid. And so I didn't choose that one, but I own it.
All right, and so Caleb, for DC, why did you choose the 3 runs that you did?
I think for Batman has so many great stories. Like there's a lot of I was debating between a lot of Batman stories, specifically like The Long Halloween, Hush. There's Batman is just full of great sort of writers. I picked The Court of Owls because it's short, and it is considered one of the better Batman stories. And I already pushed Final Crisis and All-Star Superman on you guys, and I was like, let's just make this a nice sort of little murder mystery detective story. So that's why I picked Batman Court of Owls, because it is a nice, easy segue into the Batman universe that I don't think you need to know too much about.
Although he did have just a shit ton of underlings in this one, like
Batman.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the whole Bat family is there.
Yeah, exactly. That threw me off a little bit.
But All-Star Superman, fucking phenomenal. I love this story. It is considered like a pinnacle of DC. The whole 12 issues by Grant Morrison is awesome, like sci-fi sort of extravaganza, and I think it's really well written. The art by Frank Quietly is some of my favorite out there. Like this is honestly, I just wanted to share this one with you guys, especially after our Superman episode. So
sure,
because I was debating between, again, Superman does also have a lot of great stories, a lot of one-off great stories. But All-Star Superman being at 12 issues, I knew I was pushing the precipice, and I was like, you know what, I got to do it. And so I picked a shorter Batman run.
Sure.
Final Crisis, I was told that you guys are willing to jump headfirst into stupid, crazy, zany shit, and I was like, Final Crisis.
Oh boy, did you throw us in.
on like, I was rereading it, and I was like, yeah. And I was like, I probably should have picked Flashpoint.
Should we start there with Final Crisis? Just
yeah.
Let's maybe. I mean, we didn't. Obviously, neither of you went like head to head on series, but you did both pick big, ultimate conflict and bring all the heroes together in each respective universes. So let's maybe start with those two. So that being Final Crisis for DC and Civil War for Marvel.
Final Crisis. So obviously, as they've said a lot in the story, there was a war in heaven and evil won. Basically, Darkseid and his acolytes are on Earth, and they're trying to bring about a new dark age with the anti-life equation. They're taking down Justice League members left and right, and it's up to a small contingent of superheroes to kind of make everything back to normal, as is superhero comics status quo. Basically, that is a very truncated summary, because there's a lot that happens in these 7 to 8 issues. So as you pointed out, I think, yes, we all agreed to jump in to whatever you were going to throw us into the deep end. But I got to say, as a lover of convoluted sci-fi, I said multiple times throughout this, I was like, what the fuck is going on? Genuinely, I was like, I have no idea who these characters are. Yeah.
I have no idea what they're talking about. I have no idea what's going on.
You knew the big three, but other than that, you're kind of lost.
I mean, I knew the Justice League.
Yeah.
Like, I knew some of the tertiary characters, but like there were other characters that I was like, who the fuck is this? Why should I care? I have no clue. Yeah. And that's no fault of your own or the media itself. That's my knowledge. But I think just in terms of writing and some of the plot points, again, as someone who loves convoluted sci-fi and made up pseudoscience technobabble, it still just didn't click for me for a lot of what they were talking about and what they were doing. And I don't know if that was by design or not.
Rob?
I did not like this at all.
Yeah.
First off, you look at the first few pages, beautiful artwork, but it's like 4 pages of single, like full page spreads, which, I mean, if you were buying the single issues, personally, I would be annoyed by that much of nothing happening.
Yeah.
Felt like they were trying to be like extremely cinematic here, and it kind of fell flat.
Yeah.
Well, but was there a bunch of runs leading up to this? So this for like true like dedicated fans, I bet that they wanted that.
Maybe, but I'm just thinking, you're buying like a 29-page comic.
Yeah.
And you've got so many pages of just a full page, one
panel.
image.
Yeah.
And then it's the next panel.
Are you getting your money's worth?
Yeah. Right. And overall, I did not like the pacing because it felt to me like we would get a page and a half of one part of the story, and then you switch to something else, and you get a page and a half of that, and then a page and a half of another thing, and then two characters meet up, so you get 2 pages, but then it's a page and a half of something else.
Yeah.
And it was just, like Craig said, it was like really all over the place and really hard to follow what was going on because, even not knowing these characters, I think you could follow a through line if you were like just sitting with the character for a little while. But when you're bouncing back and forth, you never get the time to say, oh yeah, this guy was doing this. Yeah, he's so-and-so said his name. Now I remember that guy because I've seen him over and over again over the past few pages.
But there is no because I was rereading it, they don't really say their names.
Yeah.
I mean, they do just push you in.
Right.
They expect if you're here, you put in the groundwork.
You've read the 3 years worth of stories that led to this.
Yeah.
You know who Dan Turpin is.
And to compare, I think Civil War did a much better job of, at least when a character is first introduced, they say the name.
Yeah.
And let you know who this person is.
Grant Morrison said, "Fuck you." We're just all these DC characters that I know and love, and they're just going to put in there, and I expect you to know them. He is kind of known for that.
But so, Mike, what were your initial thoughts?
I think maybe the problem is I'm not smart enough for DC Comics because I dove in. I really wanted it was the last one that I read, and I kind of wish it was the last one we were talking about because I could say how much I really liked the Court of Owls first. But yeah, it was very confusing for me, and I think there were a lot of words I just didn't know, and people I didn't know, and they kept talking about the new gods, and I knew people who read DC Comics and kind of understood that there were things happening. There was like the New 52 and there's the new gods, and I think those are probably not the same, but I had heard of them, but I didn't really understand how they're related to the story and what was going on.
Right. We didn't get like 2 panels of exposition.
You don't see the war in heaven that resulted in their deaths.
We don't even need to see the war in heaven. Yeah. Again, just someone saying like, "Oh man, that damn war in heaven," and now we've got all these new gods to deal with. Some of which are, and then
maybe
list our major players.
Yeah, or just like a note in the beginning, previously in DC Universe.
Yeah, who are the new gods? And then they died right away. When were they new?
Yeah.
So. I think that's a lot of where the confusion. The new gods was their names. Those are the people that were in heaven. That's the heaven that died, the new gods. Okay. And they were reborn on Earth as like Mr. Miracle, that sumo guy. They're all like reborn on Earth. Same thing with the gods from Apocalypse. It's all over the place.
Okay.
I wanted to hear your thoughts, Mike, but then I wanted to direct to you, Caleb. Is it supposed to be muddled by design? Because I felt about halfway through, stuff started to click together. Yeah. And so it's just like, I wonder if it was supposed to feel chaotic and it was supposed to feel disjointed at the beginning. You're not supposed to understand how these stories mesh together. And I felt like it was a little too jarring how much we jumped around, but towards the middle of this story, I felt like started to at least line up.
You got your bearings.
A little bit, yeah. I don't know if you guys felt the same way.
Yes. I didn't finish it. Oh. I only got to the 3rd or 4th issue and
I'm done.
That's fair.
I'm not in
but Mike?
Yeah, I felt the same way. And I wonder, when you first read it, were you reading it as like picking it up the weekly issue?
Oh, I picked up the omnibus, which collects the entirety of like things leading up to it. So that's how I read it. So I knew everybody and what was going on.
All the context.
So I had all the context for that. I had even, like I said, not only that, there was before this, you kind of had to have like a brief knowledge of like the original Crisis on Infinite Earths. You had to have a context of like the Infinite Crisis event that happened like 3 years before. So like, you guys told me you like being pushed. So I picked it.
And I do think I have a better comic background than I did before. So I do appreciate that. But it was tough. It was tough.
I get it.
Like Darkseid said, do you think you can outrun and I can't remember what it was called, but his eye beams.
The Omega beams.
Yeah, but he said, do you think you can outrun this? And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah. And
maybe you can. I have no idea.
And like apparently Darkseid was this like gritty detective like for the first half of the story. Yeah. And I was like, until they finally said that explicitly, I had no idea that that's what was happening.
Look at the artwork.
Yeah. I picked that one up.
Oh,
So when you say that the gods, they got basically reincarnated on Earth in people, and so Darkseid had died and was reincarnated as I can't remember his name. But.
Initially, he was kind of possessing the Darkseid Club. He was possessing that big boss, and then they moved him over to Dan Turpin's body. It was a whole thing.
Gotcha.
They moved him to Dan Turpin's body.
Yeah,
that's right. I do remember that. That was. I felt kind of bad for the guy, but I didn't know who he was. And then at the end was Superman said, "I know your DNA. It's Dan Turpin," and I'm like.
Sure.
Yeah,
if you say so.
It is. He said that in one of the first panels. I'm sorry that's hard for you.
I will say I do agree it's all convoluted, but one of the biggest things on why I picked this book and why it is one of my favorite events is Barry Allen comes back. He's been dead for years, since the 80s at this point. So like to finally have him come back, he is one of my favorite Flashes. So like to see him come back and to see that emotional reunion with all the speedsters, I love that shit.
Okay, because again, with no context, we're just like, oh, okay, I guess Barry was dead. Like,
yeah.
I thought don't heroes come back all the time?
No, Barry was actually one of the few that stayed dead for
Apparently
years.
Not.
And not anymore. Yeah, they brought him back, but
Saving it.
But it was probably this was in 2005. The event happened in like mid 80s, so it was a good like 20-ish years that he was dead, which is virtually unheard of.
He was on that CW show though.
Yeah.
Which was I loved. It was
pretty good.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
I do think that was one thing in kind of the convolution of it that we missed out on were kind of character moments. Because I did appreciate, the Flashes came back together and they're like Barry, and you can obviously see that this is a moment for them that they missed him, and he went to find Iris and it was very heartfelt. And I think there was just there wasn't a lot of moments like that. And, maybe that's not what it was going for, but.
I think this strictly goes for the bombast, the big, event stuff. Where I would agree with you. The small character moments that even I love aren't really present in this story. And you had to have the context to really get it.
What did you think, Caleb, as a writer, about I don't know if tongue-in-cheek is the best way to describe it, but the arc in Limbo, where they make a lot of commentary on storytelling itself.
Yeah.
Like, to me, I don't think it landed the best. I was just like, okay, we get it. Like, you think storytelling is very important. Like,
yeah.
I understand, but I don't know. It
finished telling the story.
Yeah, kind of. It felt a little forced to me. I don't know. To have an infinite story as your MacGuffin.
Yeah,
that was it. Interesting, but also
didn't really flow well.
Yeah,
with the story.
a little on the nose.
I think Grant Morrison has commented on like the nature of stories better in previous works, and his Doom Patrol and his Animal Man runs back in the 80s, but I just don't think he was able to give it enough time and space here to really mesh.
Were the characters that were in Limbo that had been forgotten, were those references to old comics? Like dead runs?
If I remember, Supergirl was in there. Supergirl disappeared in the 80s during the Crisis on Infinite Earths events, and she was literally forgotten. She saved the world, but nobody remembered. So again, this was him trying to bring all these characters that were dead back to life.
Cool.
Yeah.
One comment I had about it as I was reading it was, to me, with all and I'm sure a lot of it were words I didn't know, things that had happened before that they were drawing inspiration from or bringing back. But to me, it did seem a little MacGuffin heavy.
Yeah.
Like there always just seemed to be this other thing that they had to do.
Yeah.
Once we get that, then we can solve problem X, which will let us solve problem Y.
But there's
Right.
another problem.
yeah.
Like the Ultraman and Superman being fused together to power the giant robot.
Listen to the words you're saying, Mike.
that was my takeaway.
Yeah, it was like the robot that was created at the beginning of the universe
Yeah.
to save them from the vampire god.
Yes. No, you got it. Nailed on the head.
I mean, and I think maybe that I need a Spark Notes. Like after reading that,
Yeah.
a Spark Notes of like, okay, this is what happened. And it's like, oh, okay.
You just needed someone to say, yes, you did read that correctly. Like what you interpreted, that's what's on the paper.
Yeah.
The annotated version with like a big wide margin that
Yeah.
points to exactly this was in issue 208 of the New 52.
Well, because that Marduk, was that the vampire?
Mandrake. Or Mandrake.
Had nothing to do with Darkseid.
No.
Like, so like that really threw me for a loop, that like you've got these two infinite scale crises that have nothing to do with each other.
That's DC.
Why are you putting this in one run?
I will say that I don't think that's DC. I think that's Grant Morrison.
Yeah,
He's
okay.
got a lot of big ideas. Not all of them land. I'll give you that. I think he does all. I picked 2 Grant Morrison stories. I just now realized Final Crisis and All Star Superman. I think All Star Superman lands a lot better with its stories.
But I think with those two cataclysmic arcs, one with Darkseid and one with the ultimate vampire, like it's less than the sum of its parts. Like those two stories would be better on their own, I feel like, than shoving them into one just cause.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Darkseid story should have took precedence over the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It did make me want, like, I wanted to read the stories that came before that they kind of reference. It did make me want to, like, I want to know more about this. Like, what happened with this?
I have them, Mike.
And I would be happy to read them because I thought some of the things they're referencing sounded really great.
Yeah.
But then, in everything. And here's, okay. So and this kind of lends itself to the Superman discussion from before, where like Superman was the savior and he could do all of the things that no one else could do. I don't know. And maybe that's the difference. A difference between DC and Marvel is like DC is, I feel, very Superman heavy. Like, like he's the guy. He's the most powerful. He's the strongest, and all this. I don't think in Marvel they really have that. You know, they have a lot of runs with Captain America and Iron Man now, and before they had X-Men, but no one was really the person that would always save the world no matter what. And in this one, the moment that got me was, I think it was the bleed that they said no one can touch, no one can take it out of this realm, but it can cure anyone or destroy anything. But no one can do anything with
you
it.
can imagine,
Right?
but it can't leave this place.
Yeah, they can't take it out.
Don't take it past the seal.
No one can touch it or manipulate it except, and it just said, except Superman can. And he like had it in his mouth and then kissed Lois, which is great. Like I was happy that Lois came back to life and everything. I was just like, well, of course, Superman can.
It's almost a Deus Ex Machina at this point.
Yeah.
But we didn't even see, like, they didn't highlight that it was difficult for him. Like, he just took it and then he gave it to Lois. Like, we didn't even get like a panel of like it hurt him.
It wasn't supposed to.
Okay.
because it was like foretold, or it was what was meant to be.
I don't know if I wouldn't go that route.
Okay.
I just think it's fucking Superman.
Which is what we were talking about 2 episodes ago.
Exactly. Yeah. So what you have done, Caleb, is in one of your examples of prime DC universe.
Just affirmed you guys.
You just affirmed it. Like, yep, Superman can just do whatever the fuck he wants, and just that's how it's gonna be.
And I love it.
All right. All right.
How many Omega beams out of 5?
Well, okay. I mean, so Omega beams obliterate, right? So I think this is worthy of 5 Omega beams. 5 out of 5 Omega beams.
Okay.
No, I wasn't that bad. I think it was disjointed, but I had a good time.
Yeah.
Like, it was all right. I was confused through more of it than I would have liked.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and my comment on the pacing, I think if you were reading it in time as it was coming out, you would want to ping pong back and forth between everything, and
you'd have the time to.
Yeah, well, and you don't have to wait to see Oh man, what's Superman up to during all of this? Because it goes back and forth whenever he's doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Caleb issued us a challenge and we just failed to rise to the occasion. I thought the art was very good.
Okay.
Like I appreciated everything that was happening visually.
Okay.
Imagine the scripts for this and the artist just being like, how the fuck do I draw this?
Yeah, a lot of that abstract stuff between traveling between.
Yeah.
Like between there's there's an interstitial space between universes. What the fuck does that look like? That would be a tough order to get as an artist. So of the I'm going to throw out there though, Caleb, of the 3 that you presented for DC, this one was my least favorite.
Yeah,
I will say. I'm getting nods from Rob and Mike as well.
I would agree.
Okay. But to contrast Final Crisis, Mike, you brought us Marvel's Civil War.
Yes.
Not really to contrast this. It just happened.
It just happened.
Yeah.
In the conversation here, contrasting, another kind of ultimate gathering of heroes. So
Absolutely.
why don't you give us a little rundown of Civil War?
Sure. Well, this one wasn't a pleasant gathering of heroes, that's for sure. So Civil War starts off with a group of superheroes that are C-list superheroes, but they're on a reality TV show. And they find a group of supervillains that are well above their pay grade. But they think, well, for the ratings, let's go do this. So they rush in, and what ends up happening is, I think Nitro is the villain, explodes next to a school in Stamford, somewhere in the Midwest, explodes and kills like 800 people, including many, many children. And this is the tipping point. They say, superheroes cannot run free anymore. They can't be the masked vigilantes. They need to be registered, and they need to be trained, and they're going to be all agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., basically. They're going to be an arm of the U.S. government.
Which brings up a weird question. Since when has children dying in school made the U.S. do anything?
This is a fictional universe, Rob.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Suspension of disbelief.
Exactly.
Yeah. That was the hardest part to believe. Super robots, guys flying, that's fine.
Right. That's a very good and sad point.
Yeah, big move.
But so they're going to pass the Superhero Registration Act that forces all superpowered beings in the United States, anyway, to register with the government and undergo training. And until they undergo training, they can't do any superheroics.
Become federal employees.
Yep. Which means, positively, they would get a pension, they would get a paycheck, sick days, and they wouldn't be liable for damages the collateral damage that occurred when they were out superheroing.
What does it mean for a superhero to have a sick day?
Like,
you don't have to go.
Yeah, I guess unless something's really, really bad, like you know someone else has got it covered.
Right.
I've always read that as like they don't know how to like quantify full benefits for superheroes, or they're just like, here's everything.
Yeah.
You get all these things.
Yeah, there's a full benefits package.
Yeah.
We don't know we haven't hammered out all the details yet, but there's a full benefits package.
And so this Superhero Registration Act splits the superhero community down the center. Iron Man is pro this registration. He talks to this woman who lost a son at Stamford and decides, yeah, this is what we need to do. This is the tipping point. Too many people have died because we're just out there doing our thing, and we don't hold any responsibility for it. Captain America is on the opposite side and says, no, we need to be our own conscience. We don't need to become an arm of the government. They're corrupt. We don't know what they're going to tell us to do, and we don't want them, we don't want to be the weapon in them pulling the trigger. Mm-hmm. And so the two groups, pro-registration and anti-registration, form, and they fight each other up until the very end when Captain America ends up surrendering.
I'll start off. I did really enjoy this run. Mm-hmm. I don't know if comparatively to Final Crisis, it was because I knew most of our roster, and I don't know if that's because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe or not.
I mean, if I asked you who Reed Richards was, you'd be like Mr. Fantastic.
Yes.
They have a more prevalent. Most of the main players of the Marvel Universe, even if just by like hearsay.
Yep.
all the people in Final Crisis, all their heroes are a bit more obscure, I think.
Right.
You know, it's a bit harder to jump into. Anyways, I'm sorry.
No. That's a fantastic point. That's exactly what I was trying to make. So I appreciate that. So that unfortunately gave it a leg up, at least in that category. That I was like, to have more context of what's going on. It's like, I recognize Spider-Man. I know Spider-Man's deal. Like,
well, I do think even if you didn't know that, the comic itself, I felt like it gave you more context in what was going on. Like when Spider-Man takes off his mask, everyone is gasping and talking about how he's been the most secretive about his secret identity. This was a huge thing for him to do.
Right.
He had already mentioned why he wouldn't want to do that because of other things that have happened. And he told us why this is a big deal for him.
Right. Character development was built in to the story itself rather than rather than Marvel expecting you to go out and get the context on your own.
Yeah.
Which I appreciated.
I do love JJ's fainting at Peter Parker's reveal.
Yeah. But, I love Civil War, and you had to play through it in Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, which was also pretty fun. But I think it has a lot of really fantastic character moments, which are maybe missing from the Crisis. There are just all these fantastic moments between characters that you love to see. They're like real people. Even the one moment that gets me was Tony Stark. He's sitting back and he says, like, my God, let us be doing the right thing. And you see that doubt in him. Yeah. And I think that's phenomenal. And even, there's a point with Captain America where he stops near the end. He stops and he says, "We're doing the wrong thing." And so they're real people. They have real.
He's even
doubt
crying
in
at that
themselves.
point.
Yeah.
And I love that moment.
Yeah, even in the first showdown, there's on Captain America's side, there's like a hesitation. Like, are we really going to fight for this? And on the other side, are we willing to go up against our brothers for what they believe in?
And how much lethal force are we going to use? And there's an escalation, which I couldn't. The one quote I pulled out when reading this, because at one point, the big tipping point in terms of their conflict is clone Thor kills
Goliath.
Thank you. And after the fact, I think it was Tony Stark says that even though Thor reacted like a police officer would.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, damn. Which I thought it was very poignant. But yeah, it was like the idea of when do we start applying lethal force? When is this a grander conflict than just a disagreement?
Right. Yeah.
And I think in terms of the pacing of the whole series, of the whole run, it ramped up really nicely.
Yeah.
And I think tangentially related, I think maybe this is part of where the difference is so drastic between something like Final Crisis and Civil War is in Final Crisis, the villain is your typical bad guy just doing bad things because that's what he does.
This is a moral quandary.
The villain is a decision.
Right.
Which side do you stand on of this line? And both sides have merit and both sides have detriments. And which do you choose? And do you choose it with enough conviction to fight for it? That is a fascinating question that everyone can, I think, empathize with.
Oh, yeah.
So we should probably ask that question of the people around the table who's pro-registration and who's anti-registration in regards to this iteration in Marvel.
Okay, so here's the thing. If this was happening in DC, absolutely 100% pro-registration.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. DC heroes do seem more like thugs.
Yeah.
And even though they don't really kill or anything, like, it seems like DC has a little bit more collateral damage. I mean, everybody's always saved at the end, but buildings are destroyed. So, yeah, register and insure that shit.
But that's not, you're dodging the question, Ron.
No, yeah.
We're talking about Marvel right now.
But yeah, Marvel's a little bit more iffy. Boy, I don't know.
Right? It is. I don't know that I could say either. Like, I do think I would lean a little bit more pro-registration. Just the idea that, especially because I feel like at that point in the kind of the universe, there's superhumans everywhere. There's just so many of them.
Right.
Like they're becoming so prolific that it's just like, okay, for regular people to survive, I don't know that.
No, I will say it's a more interesting quandary in the comic than in the film version.
Yeah.
Where it's
for sure.
a division of the U.S. government rather than like a worldwide thing that's like quasi-governmental. it's a lot harder to say, yeah, I want to be an arm of the U.S. government.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I think Captain America has a line. It's like, well, right now we fight who we know are doing bad. If we do this, suddenly the only enemies we fight are the enemies of the United States government.
Yep.
Something along those lines, which is a fantastic point. And so I think both options are bad.
Yeah.
Like, but we Rob and I have gone on and on. You guys are the comic guys. Caleb, Mike, what do you guys think?
Yeah, it is a very difficult decision. I'm pretty much always like, yeah, Iron Man. Like, I love Iron Man. He's my guy. And in this instance, I probably lean towards Iron Man. Probably pro-registration in this case, just because, I think about, even in our world, I think about King Henry VIII. Okay, he's just some dude who wanted to get a divorce and he wanted to marry this young hot chick, right? And so what did he do? He broke England away from the Catholic Church and formed his own church, and it had ramifications for the world for centuries. And it, especially at that time, I mean, people died. There were wars because of this, and it was based on the whims of one person. And when you have people running around with superpowers that can do like incredibly powerful things, a lot of things can happen based on the whim of that one person. And, should that be allowed, that they just get to go do that when, whatever they want, whatever their power might be, that's hard. And I think there is where they could be, trained and tracked. But then there's the other part of me that's like, that sounds really bad. You're taking people and you're saying, okay, you no longer get to be your own person because of how you were born. You have to be tracked and registered. You don't get to make choices for yourself. And that's awful.
And which government registered people before, Mike?
Well, but
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. It's not.
They're not
a
tracking
great
all
choice.
superhumans, are they? They're just tracking
If you have superpowers, you're going to be registered.
Oh,
Yep.
Yeah,
okay.
It's not even if you're going to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's like if you have superpowers but you decide not to use them, you still go on the registry.
Oh,
Yeah.
I misinterpreted that point because I thought it was, if you're going to use your powers in public, then you need to be registered.
No,
Oh yeah, everyone has to be registered if you have superpowers.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you don't want to use them, I guess you maybe don't have to go through the training. But
If this is the case, I revise my answer. I am with Cap all the way.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
Rebels all the way.
Yeah.
Well, in regards to Tony Stark, I felt like every time we saw him kind of like making a big decision in this run, it was weighed down by the guilt of what had happened. Like they really highlighted that like he was being driven by guilt more than anything else.
Yeah.
Not necessarily logic or what was best for everyone.
I think he was being manipulated just a tad by
Yeah?
the mom, Miriam.
Think so?
Oh, for sure.
yeah.
Well, and I think part of it was, I guess I don't know when they made this if they wanted people to sway one way or another. Like, I don't know what the writer's intention was for, like, if you wanted more people to be towards this side or not. I do think that they tended to have the people on Iron Man's side just do more bad things, like cloning Thor. That's probably not a great idea. Getting together with all the supervillains, getting the Thunderbolts back together and all that. Like, not doing great. That they're supposed to be under control, but then they almost kill Spider-Man in the sewer. It just seems like the writer was almost trying to say, yeah, but that's not the right side.
Right.
Like, you get to choose your side. That was like the end panel on every comic. It said, choose your side. But I think the writer wanted you to be on Cap's side.
They made it very clear that the government was going to choose the unethical option or the unethical solution to their problem first.
Yeah.
Always.
So I will say that the pro-reg side, I think it's hard to disagree with them from a point of view of like they have three of the smartest men on the planet: Tony Stark, Reed Richards, and Hank Pym. And so, like, to go against them, what makes you think that you can go against them? They fucking made a clone of Thor, To swing it around to me for a moment.
Yeah.
I am anti-registration. Full stop. I do agree with Tony Stark's point. And within the comic where he's like, it's either registration or jail. Like, there was no going back to this. And I do agree, like, I don't think they made a way to go back to the status quo after this. I think this is one of the few events that changes the status quo,
Yeah.
going forward. But I'm also reminded of a quote from Civil War II from Tony, where they're about to go to war again over another thing. And Tony is meeting with Cap, and he's like, Captain, I need your advice on this, because if you tell me I'm wrong, I'll agree with you. Because after the last time, meaning the first one, I will step aside.
Yeah.
So I defer to that too when I look at this. I mean, that released years down the road, but I still look at that like, I think even Tony has regrets about what happened.
Absolutely, for sure.
Because I think you made a very interesting point that the three most intelligent men on the planet all sided one way. But I think that just highlights that making the intelligent decision isn't necessarily making the right decision.
Yeah.
Something that makes sense on paper still just might be wrong.
But also, how do you argue against that intelligence too, though? Like, oh, this is just how I feel. Whereas they have quantifiable evidence that crime has gone down since this has passed,
But at what cost?
Yeah.
Like at the cost of the freedom of a population.
Oh, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just,
Yeah.
And-
No, I'm
ends
not
don't
arguing.
justify
I'm not
the
arguing
behavior.
you on this, Caleb.
Yeah, I think it is very difficult. And then, but at the end, it is. Well, I think that the writer is pushing you more towards one side. It's not like it was in Civil War II, where it's pretty obvious which side was wrong.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, Captain Marvel, thumbs
They
down.
did Carol Danvers dirty for that one.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
What I think is interesting is the overarching decision of Civil War is a moral one, and it's what are you willing to sacrifice or give up for the greater good. No, I was
I almost did.
come on.
The greater good.
There we go. But so I think that that's the bigger argument between these two sides. But I think what the pro-registration side doesn't consider at all is they are taking people in the middle gray area who are genuinely motivated and trying to do good, and they turn them into villains. They say, guess what? There is no middle ground anymore. You have to pick a side.
Right.
And only the Sith deal in absolutes.
Isn't that an absolute statement?
Yeah. Is it not clear that I'm a Sith? That's the vibe I've been trying to put out for a long time now.
So, cloning Thor. I'm just curious. Is that a big ethical quandary for you guys? Cloning Thor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because and they didn't even just clone Thor. They cloned him into a machine hybrid, and then tried to program him, which is like, okay, is he sentient?
Yeah.
I mean, he kind of seemed like he had his own wills, but then was it just programming? But are we just programming? A lot of questions, and I don't think that was a good decision.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the many bad decisions that they made that said, oh, you're on the wrong side of this whole thing.
Again, the hubris of these intelligent men.
And it leaned more towards kind of the Invincible arc that like the government's trying to make just weapons. Like they're not trying to make or improve people. They're like, no, we just need weapons to respond to things.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a person.
So what was your guys' response to the ending? The resolution of the argument?
I like the callback to the Dear John letter that Susan that she wrote. So I like the letter that Reed Richards wrote to her, and I think that was a really good character moment because he realizes he was wrong, but also he stands by his decision, but he wants to apologize. Like it was, I thought that was a really good moment. I'm not sure I really like the new status quo.
Yeah.
So ending of the story, I think was really good, but what happened in the universe, I didn't quite like that.
Yeah. Just to bounce off the letter for a moment, good character moment for Reed Richards, and it shows completely how his mind works when he's like, I saw you and I went home and cried for 83 minutes.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I love me some Reed Richards.
Like a passionate letter written dispassionately.
Yeah.
It was the juxtaposition was fun.
Yeah. I agree with Rob. The ending is good. And I think part of why, it works really well is it's not. It's a good ending in like the story wise. Story wise, it's a good ending, but it doesn't make you feel good.
No,
because there's still ramifications that they're going to be feeling for a long time, and so it's not. It doesn't go back to the status quo.
Right.
I think that was kind of go back to Crisis. I think like they just kind of recreated the world, right? And it was like, yep,
It was a happy ending.
yeah. And this wasn't a universe reset. It was, here's some stuff, and there's gonna be bad feelings for a while.
Long-standing ramifications.
Yeah.
Somewhat, again, one of the reasons I love Civil War, not only the tight cohesiveness of the whole line-wide crossover, but also at the end, it sets up two of the, I think, are kind of the coolest moments for Spider-Man. He makes a deal with the devil so everybody forgets who he is, which also has fucking ramifications.
Right.
And Steve Rogers is shot after this. So there is a death of Captain America arc after this. So Civil War does have ramifications, and it leads into a lot of great stories. It sets up a lot of cool stuff.
Who shot Captain America? I can't remember.
Shit. I had just read that not too long ago.
I was gonna look it up. It wasn't Maria Hill, was it?
No. God, who was that?
Crossbones?
Yeah, Crossbones.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Can't believe you just pulled that out of your head.
Oh, no. Oh, sorry. It's Crossbones snipes at him while Sharon Carter, who has been brainwashed by Dr. Faustius,
That's right.
posing as S.H.I.E.L.D. psychiatrist, delivers the killing blow.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's why I thought it was Maria Hill. It was another S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. Yeah, that makes sense.
Craig, you mentioned that Final Crisis makes you want to read the other ones.
Yeah.
But I think Civil War really made me want to know, okay, what is going to happen after this? How does superhero society move on from this point?
And where I think again, a big difference between the two, Final Crisis made me want to like go off and read more to get more context, whereas Civil War, I'm sure that material is out there and you could go get it, but I also felt like it was a great self-contained story.
Yeah.
Like I didn't feel like I was really missing anything by not reading any of the extra materials. Versus something like Final Crisis. So it's like, I need to go read this whole other run to understand like these two panels.
Yeah. Can we talk art a little bit?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because I read Civil War than Final Crisis because I thought these two are going to be kind of similar.
Nope.
Well, I mean like the big event with everybody in it.
Yeah.
And I liked the art more in Final Crisis, but I feel like what we got in Civil War, while it was a little bit more bland, was also more clear. It was just easier to tell what was going on.
There's a lot of like extravagancy to Final Crisis. I think that was the point of it, to show the epic scale.
Right.
I think the art in Civil War really draws on the humanness of all these characters. Again, showing the big difference on how people perceive Marvel and DC, I think.
Yeah.
That's a really great point.
Yeah, Final Crisis had a lot of really great wide shots with a lot of detail and really gave you some fun environment, whereas I felt like Civil War was very character focused in the detail.
There's a lot of good close-ups,
Yeah.
especially the crying scene from Captain America at the end. A lot of great close-ups.
Yeah.
Before we move on, though, Speedball, the guy who starts the Civil War, basically, he's the one that's like, we're doing this for the ratings at the beginning.
Yeah.
So he becomes racked with guilt after this. He survives. He becomes racked with. You know what happens to him?
He becomes penance.
So like he dons this metal suit with spikes inside that activates his powers. So he's constantly in pain as penance for his action.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Super dark.
That's honestly one of my favorite characters, and I loved playing him in Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2. That's so interesting. Yeah, because he loses his powers and he can only access them when he feels that pain. But
His
it's like a
suit
mental
is-
block, right?
His suit is basically an Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. Every time he moves, it digs in and cuts his skin. And
Jeez.
yeah, that's wild. But yeah, they don't get into it in that. But I think I have the comic set where he's in it.
Damn.
So that's part one of our debate. I think we got to go now.
Well, we might call it, it's the end of round one.
End of round one.
End of round one between Mike and Caleb.
Please send us your thoughts on who won this round.
Marvel.
Shut up.
I If you want to share any thoughts on anything you've heard today or your thoughts on Civil War or Final Crisis, we'd love to hear them. You can reach out to us at strikesarefancy@gmail.com. We're at strikesarefancy on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And you can also go down to the description of this episode, send us a voice message via Anchor. We love it. We'll play your little clip at the end of an episode and give some reactions to your thoughts.
And if you shit talk DC on Instagram, you might get on an episode too.
No. But also, quit comparing Civil War and Final Crisis. They're not the same.
That is true.
One is a good comic.
The punch now goes to Rob. So, not Mike.
I did it for you.
Thank you.
We're moving out of boxing and entering WWE. Caleb's about to go get a folding chair.
It's Caleb with the folding chair.
So that brings us to the end of round one. If you like what you've been hearing, stick around. In a couple weeks, we'll be bringing you round two, where we will be talking about at least 2 other of the comics, depending on how long we chat about it, possibly the 4 other series that we've mentioned before. Caleb, what are the DC ones?
DC left is Batman Court of Owls and All-Star Superman.
Marvel is Secret Wars and Secret Invasion.
Tune in a couple weeks as we discuss those. Until then, I have been Cataclysmic Craig.
I'm just Rob.
This is Caleb.
Victorious Mike.
Yeah. To be determined.
Yeah, that's true.
So tune in 2 weeks for the exciting conclusion. Same bat time, same bat channel.